It's clear that the human race needs monetary property in order to have property rights. And if you're going to have property, you would like perfected property. An example of defective property would be I sell you swampland in Florida. That's not as good as selling you a block of Manhattan built on granite. I think people intuitively understand a building that'll last 100 years is better than a building or a shack that's made of palm fronds. One property is better than the other. Swampland is not as good as granite land. I think Bitcoin is digital property, and so it's been engineered to be durable property with integrity over time. And I think that makes it a macroeconomic solution to the problem of monetary inflation or savings over the long term. And I would say on that basis, it replaces the mythical gold storage vault as a long-term store of value. But I think that the other thing that's critical to understand about Bitcoin is the digital part of the property. It's not just engineered property that's better than other types of property, but it's digital, which means that you could take $1 billion of property from a building, or $1 billion of land, or $1 billion of gold, or $1 billion of a company, or $1 billion of commodities, livestock, timber, coal, bushels of corn, whatever have you. You can take that $1 billion worth of property, you can dematerialize it to a set of private keys that have no mass, no weight. And that means you can move it at the speed of light. And the second thing you could do is program it. So if I can dematerialize $1 billion, then I can program it. And if I can program it and move it at the speed of light, and I can compress it so it takes no space, I can put it on a mobile device. And this is pretty much the most powerful idea of the 21st century, which is every great company, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, they've all become $1 trillion assets because they digitize or digitally transform some part of our economy, be it digital relationships or digital photos or digital books or digital maps. If you have digital property, it means that you can give property to 8 billion people on a mobile phone that costs $50. And at that point, the property gets smarter at the speed that the chip gets smarter. And so I think intuitively we understand that digital maps are better than maps. Google's a $1 trillion company because it has digital maps. And the difference is the digital map tells you whether you should go to the restaurant, how to get to the restaurant, helps you avoid the traffic on the way to the restaurant. And increasingly, I think people are concluding that digital map will actually drive your car to the restaurant. That's a much better map than a Rand McNally map that came printed on some paper. And that's why Google is worth what it's worth. I think the digital property is the same idea, which is I take my money, I put it in the palm of my hand, and now I can move it 1 million times a second. I can search 100 million companies in the world and find the one company for Saturday afternoon that's willing to pay me a yield on my property or rent it from me. And the idea that I could actually shop my property or my money to 100 million companies 1 million times a second is a big idea. It's a big enough idea that digital property should demonetize most other forms of property. Just like digital maps kind of, I don't know what the word is, but digital maps destroyed paper maps. You won't find anybody with a car, anybody in the world carrying paper maps around. They're gone. They're digitally transformed. And digital music, took out all of the CDs and the phonographs and the records. No one hires an orchestra to come into their home to play music for them. They use their mobile phone plugged into Pandora or Spotify. And so digital property is the basis of the 21st century economy. And that's why the world needs Bitcoin. I think that that there are a lot of strategies for investment. One strategy is just to buy property and hold it for 100 years. Mm-hmm. That's like the equivalent of like buying all the land in New York City and just holding the land and being a landlord. I think there are other business strategies like renting, like generating yield, trading it, developing it, building buildings on it, building companies in the buildings on it, becoming investment bankers, buying and selling the companies in the buildings on the land. All of these are different things you can do. MicroStrategy's strategy is just to buy it and to hold it. That primarily is because of of the accounting, the tax, and the corporate governance issues that we face. That it's exponentially harder for us to do other things, and our strategy that we've disclosed and articulated to our shareholders is to acquire and to hold Bitcoin. But I've no doubt other companies and other investors will do more things than just buy and hold.
Where do you see Bitcoin going in the second half of the year? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's difficult to predict near term, and our strategy is a decade-long strategy, which is just to buy it when we have free cash flows and hold it. And so we've just consistently been acquiring Bitcoin month by month, quarter by quarter, and expect to continue to do it. My general view of the fundamentals of Bitcoin is they've dramatically improved over the last 12 months and even over the last 6 months. I think institutional adoption has improved. I think that the Bitcoin mining sector has matured. I think there's a lot of institutional capital that has been flowing into Bitcoin, has continued to flow into Bitcoin. And I think the regulatory environment is clarifying, and it's becoming, and every single month that goes by, there's more information and more clarity. And all of those things are giving institutional investors more comfort. I think today there is a story of $125 million being invested in one Bitcoin miner. 2 days ago was the story of another Bitcoin miner coming public, raising $100 million to come public. Last week was the story of another Bitcoin miner that's going to come public. A few days before that, another company coming public. I think that by the end of the year, you'll probably have somewhere between 15 and 20 publicly traded Bitcoin companies. And with all of those companies with access to the capital markets, I think that that's very stabilizing and legitimizing for Bitcoin. And also they're serving as channels to allow large pools of capital to flow from conventional assets into Bitcoin via their securities that they're issuing. So 12 months ago, there wasn't any public company on my radar that had more than $1 million or $2 million worth of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Right now, there are billions and billions of dollars of Bitcoin on balance sheets of publicly traded companies. And so the fundamental trend is clear. Bitcoin is digital property, and I view it as being as important as electricity or steel. We take crypto steel. Bitcoin is crypto steel. There's a point at which everybody realized that steel was going to change civil engineering and the civilization. Without steel, there would be no New York City. There would be no building more than a few stories tall. So it's an elemental material that fundamentally changes the civilization. Now, I don't know how long it took to introduce the concept of steel or electricity to the society, but presumably it took about 30 or 40 years before most people understood it. If you went to a politician in the year 1900 and you said, "We invented electricity, we think it's going to be a benefit to your city," would they have welcomed that, or would they have been worried it was going to burn the city down? And if you went to a bakery or a restaurant or a shipbuilder or any business person, or you went to a minister and you said, "I have this electricity thing," what would they think? If you went to a journalist, what would they think? It takes 1,000 hours to really understand this well. It takes 100 hours to understand it not well. And in 10 hours, you get confused a little bit. And after 10,000 hours, maybe you master it. So, if you think about Bitcoin like that, digital property, crypto steel to build this 21st century cyber economy, okay, that kind of blows people's minds. Now, we're living in year 2 of institutional adoption of Bitcoin. As I was saying, a year ago, you couldn't find a single public company with $1 million or $2 million of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So in the past 12 months, CFOs and CEOs and journalists and politicians and senators and mayors and governors and presidents are all being asked to have an opinion on Bitcoin. And it's like showing up a year after inventing steel and saying, I have this new thing. But by the way, steel ships are so much better than every other ship. They obsolesced all other ships. And steel buildings are so much better. They obsolesced everything we knew about architecture for 1,000 years. They had to throw it all away. It was literally a paradigm shift. So if I invent crypto steel, and it's going to be a paradigm shift in the way that you construct banks in cyberspace. In fact, it becomes a paradigm shift in the way 100 million businesses create everything. 8 billion people are going to deal with each other billions of times an hour through 100 million businesses differently. How many people understand? And the answer is 99% of the politicians and the media and businesses and institutional investors, they don't understand. It's new to them.